Hey there, and welcome to part 2 of the hipster watch image. In part 1, we created basically everything you see here. So if you did not see part 1, might be a good time to go ahead and check that out. Here in part 2, what we're going to be doing is a little bit more stylization. We're going to be bringing our hipster in, talking about composition and getting this page design and everything like that, and basically bringing everything together to our final image. It's going to be very, very cool. So here's our basic image. Now what I want to do is we're going to stretch this out just a little bit, and we're going to bring this image of our hipster into the text here. Now the one thing that I do want to do is I'm going to hit my crop tool, C for the crop tool, and I'm going to type in 22 up here and then 14. And the reason is what I want to make sure that I've got going is a ratio, a 22 by 14 ratio here. And let's just move that around there. And the reason I am doing this is because this is the size of the book that Rob Grimm has printed. This is the size of his portfolio book, and I'm going to explain that in just a little bit. So you don't have to use these numbers, but if this is going to be on the web or a certain aspect ratio or 11 by 14 printer paper, this is going to be the size of your portfolio or whatever, you can just type those in, and that's going to be your aspect ratio. So I'm going to hit this checkbox right over here. We can see we've got a little bit blank right there, which is not a big problem. But we are doing this image, and the goal is to put it in, Rob's actual printed portfolio, which is very, very cool. So with this, what we want to do is make sure we're sizing it properly for the portfolio, and then we're going to talk a little bit about like a page layout and how that's going to influence how the final image actually comes together. So this sort of thing, you'll be asked to do this. If you're doing this just for yourself, then use these parameters to whatever guideline you need. But if you're going to be doing like a print ad or an online ad or things like that, you're definitely going to be asked to output things at certain sizes, at certain resolutions, and whatnot. So you would just want to be able to be sure that you can actually do that. So notice I'm not typing in 22 inches by 14 inches or something like that. I'm just typing in that aspect ratio, and crop's taking a little bit longer than I would have thought. Hopefully it's not going to do inches or anything like that. Let's just it did fine. I can see it didn't change the actual size of the image because here's the before, 8.3% zoom. Here's the after, still 8.3% zoom. So it just kind of brought it over there a little bit. Okay, pretty cool. Now what we're going to do, I'm going to create a new layer on top of everything, and I'm going to hold down Alt or Option and hit Delete. It's going to fill with my foreground color. Okay, now I'm going to hit Command or Control R first, which is going to bring up our rulers. I'll tell you about that in a second. And then Command or Control T. So with our rulers up, basically I can measure out our image. So we've got, these are going to depend on how you have your files, and here are your preferences. Well, you can't do it when you have, there we go. This is your units and rulers, depending on how you set that up. But one thing it will give you is the bounding box to show you the left corner, the middle, and the right. So if you want to make a guide to basically draw a line down the middle of your image, it's a really easy way to do it. So just click here. I'm in my move tool. I'm going to click here and just drag from the left to the right over here to the middle of my image, and let go. And we're going to hit the checkbox up there. Really, it's kind of just a way to see the middle of your image very easily. You just create a new layer, hit Command T on it, and that will automatically show up every time. Now I can just delete that layer. But now what I have is a nice guide, which is the center of my image. So if this is a 2-page spread, I can have my watch placed well on the left side, as well as my person or whatever here on the right side. So it's kind of an important thing to be able to, see things as a spread, not just as a single retouched image. For instance, the watch needs to be pushed over to the left. So I'm going to click on the watch, hold down the Shift key, and just push that over to the left a little bit. There we go. Now we have our hipster, and we're going to go ahead and bring him in as well. So I need to decide where we're actually going to place our hipster. Oh, he got cut off. He shouldn't have been cut off because every time I use the crop tool, I did not have the delete crop pixels checked. But apparently he still got cut off. Not a huge deal. Let's delete it. We haven't done anything with that yet. So what we're going to do is I'm going to hit Command O to open. We're going to go to Hipster Watch, our tutorial images, and we're going to click here and hit Open here. We'll just have to re-import him. If you want a different color space, make sure you do convert your color spaces here. There we go. And use our move tool, click and drag in there. And there we have our hipster. We just close that one. Okay. So when kind of bringing this together, there are a couple things that we want to make sure we do. Actually, you know what? I'm going to do something kind of cool here. I'm going to duplicate this layer to a new document. All right, we'll go to image and then down to reveal all. I'm just going to put a quick layer mask on this guy. I'm going to use the magic wand tool and just basically click right around here in my background. So I'm going to shift click a couple of these areas. There we go. This does not have to be that accurate, but it's going to help me when I size him into the actual document with the watch here. There we go. Looking pretty good. Now let's go ahead and click on a layer mask button there, and I'm going to hit Command I on my layer mask to invert it. So there we go. It's not a great job, but it doesn't really need to be. Let's just delete that layer out, and I'm going to move this in now with this layer mask. And the reason I'm going to do that is, let's just shift click and drag that in now. Now I can move it up and down and see how he kind of like relates in that space. And let's just close that and hit don't save. The reason I did that in a separate document is because if I was here in this document and I didn't want to resize him, I'd have to like bring him down here, select out part of this, and put that on my layer mask. And I'd have to like bring him up here, select out part of that, put that on my layer mask, like bring it to the left and bring it up and things like that. I don't really want to do all that. So it's easier to just do it in a different document and then kind of bring it all back together. So when kind of like playing with the sizing and the spacing and everything like that of this guy, originally the idea was to have him be quite a bit smaller. This is in the comp, he was something like this. But kind of looking at the images side by side, it becomes pretty apparent that he doesn't look that small. And a great way to see like how things are relating together is to kind of just like zoom out quite a bit. If you want to hide this line here, pretty easy. Hit Command H and that's going to hide your line. There we go. So zoomed out quite a bit, I can now see how he relates. Let's hit Command T, maybe make him a little bit smaller there. I can see how he relates to the size of the watch. Not only his placement, like, oh, does it look good over there? Does it, over there? Does he need to come down or up? That watch needs to be in the scene. Let's just undo the size. Maybe we'll just bring him down. The watch definitely needs to be in the scene. Here, let's grab our crop tool. Let's just go up this way a little bit. So I hit C for the crop tool, and then I'm just using my up arrow. Sorry, I was using my down arrow, which is going to move my crop up. Doesn't make sense, but in CS6 they kind of changed your direction. There we go. All right, and there we go. Because we did not have delete crop pixels checked, he's still visible there. Okay, and there we go. So I can kind of figure out, how he's sized with our watch and everything like that. And let's bring him a little bit smaller, and the placement. And again, it doesn't sound like it would make sense, but doing this from like zoomed out is a pretty good idea. Next thing I want to do is I'm going to hit Command H again to unhide that selection, and I would just want to make sure that this is still visible, and that the centerfold of the page here is not going to be like in the middle of his face or his arm. So it's gonna fold out nicely with this detail on the left and that detail there on the right. So let's just zoom out and see. Yeah, and I really do think that's a nice balance. He's quite large in the frame, but in my opinion, it works pretty well because people are bigger than watches. All right, now we do have this background. Remember, we had this background that we put in there earlier, and we can kind of load that behind him if we need to. We're gonna do a better job cutting him out in a little bit. We just want to do a rough job to kind of get everything placed in there. All right, so what we've got is our background here. Let's go ahead and bring that right up above there. And now I can kind of move this around to decide, where this is going to be. Now, obviously, we don't want it visible over here. So what we're going to do is, oh, you know what? I moved just the layer. What I wanted to do is move the entire group up there. Okay, there we go. Let's try something like that. Now we'll put a layer mask on either the layer or the group. In this case, it doesn't really matter because we've just got one layer on the group. And then I'm going to paint black at 100% right up over here. So he provides also like a pretty nice barrier between, between what's going on here on this side and what I needed to extend the background there on the right side. So It kind of works out really nicely in that way. If you do want to, let's just make that black there on the layer mask. If you do want to move this, unlink your layers. So we have a layer and a layer mask. They're linked together. If I want to move just my layer mask is going to stay in position now. So I can kind of get a pretty good idea of, what's actually going to be going on here. I can make it smaller, and we could just do all kinds of things here. And really, I want something that's not going to draw a lot of attention to that area. It's just the background. And I feel like that works out quite well. So I'm pretty happy with that crop. Maybe we could bring him down just a little bit. There we are. And we have a little bit of an area up here to deal with. You can take care of it in a number of ways. The easiest way would just be to crop in just a little bit. I'm not sure if we want to do that. Let me decide on that in a little bit. You could always clone stamp it up. That's not a huge deal. But I don't want to do much more cropping until the end, because it's a pretty good composition right now, and I don't want to just start doing things that are going to ruin my composition. Okay, so let's go ahead and start working on our subject here, this hipster. We need to get him cut out a little bit better from the background. So what we're going to do is shift click on the layer mask and kind of look at the before and the after here with our crop there. All right, pretty cool. I think this is going to be a good example of making custom brushes, especially for that beard. I think you really could use a nice custom brush, which is going to be cool. I'm going to go ahead and hold Alt or Option, fill my layer mask again with white. We're going to redo this magic wand. This time I'm going to lower my tolerance, and what that's going to do is just allow me to select less with each of the times that I click. And I'm just holding down Shift and clicking over and over again. And by selecting less, it's basically just it's not going to cut into, like it was cutting into his suit a little bit there. And this is just going to give us a little bit more of a clean edge. There we go. That looks pretty good. I'm not too worried about the beard area. We can take care of that in a number of ways. Next, I'm going to click on this Refine Edge button. And here we'll be able to see how the edge actually looks. So we can see, on layers. If I inverse this selection, so if I go to Select and then I go Inverse, then I can click Refine Layers, Refine Edge, sorry. See this on layers, and now we can actually get a pretty good idea of what my layer mask actually looks like, which is very good as I edit it. So it needs to be pulled in a little bit, right? Let's just bring these back down to 0. So these will be at your defaults. Okay, so that's at my defaults here. I'm going to bring in feathering just a little bit. All right, and then I usually do a little bit of contrast with that as well. So feathering and contrast kind of used together works out quite well. Now we're going to shift the edge in just a little bit. There we go. And it's not really doing anything. Let me hit cancel here just to make sure we have it selected. All right, so let's go down to refine edge here. There we go. It should cut it out. Let's do it show on layers. There we go. And it's not really doing anything at all. If I have the show original or not. Let's hit OK and see what's going on. All right, that didn't do anything, which is very weird, but there's a way around it. What I'm going to do is hit Command I on the layer mask and then just invert that layer mask again. So hit Command I again. If something like that acts up for you when you're doing a selection, sometimes things are just going to happen in Photoshop where you're just like, I don't know what's happening. I don't want to take 30 minutes to figure it out, but there's always a way around. So instead of creating the selection while it was just a selection, I'm going to use my layer mask to edit that selection. So I'm going to click on my layer mask, and then I'm going to go to Select and then down to Refine Mask. And that's just going to allow me to refine the mask. Now it should allow me to, let me just change all these numbers back to 0 here. There we go. Now it's going to allow me to actually refine the mask. So we're going to bring up our feathering a little bit and our contrast a little bit as well. That's just going to make our edge just a bit nicer. And then we're going to pull the shift edge in just a bit. And that should get rid of any kind of haloing that I have right around So we can click on this show original, where we have that, you know, bit of haloing right around there, and unclick it, and there we go. Looks quite a bit better. Okay, now we have to deal with things like the hair, which can be dealt with in a number of ways. One thing I'm going to try is select color range. So I'm going to shift click on this layer mask, which is going to deselect it, or make it temporarily inactive. Now we're going to click back on our layer, and I'm going to go to select, and then down here to color range. And I should be able to, in theory anyway, select the color range that's behind his beard without actually selecting his beard. And this will be nice because it's pretty much the easiest way to select out a beard or a hair or things like that. So let's try this. Basically, I'm clicking right here on this color and changing my fuzziness to where it's, you know, here we want a nice contrast between white and dark. Here, this will be selected, that will not be selected. We want a nice contrast. Like this is just bringing up too much information here in the beard. So we want something right about there. It looks pretty good. So I'm gonna hit OK. And that selects out basically this blue area in the beard. Now, if I click back on my layer mask, I don't want that to be visible. So I need to use my paintbrush, and I need to paint with black where it's selected. Okay, we're getting a little bit more complex, but painting with black where it's selected, now we'll paint away the blue because that's what we actually selected. So I can paint here, but I can't really see what's going on. So what I'm going to do is hit Control or Command H, and that's just going to hide my selection. So now what I can do is start painting in right over here, which is going to paint away my blue, and it's going to leave the beard intact, which is very nice. So I don't have to go, you know, doing anything crazy, leaving my beard intact. All right, let's do the same thing over here. I'll just do it again so you guys can see. Basically, same idea. So shift click on this layer mask, which is just going to make this visible. Click on our layer, go to select, and down to color range. Okay, we're going to click on the color range that's right behind his head. You could probably use the same color range, but I like to do it again just to make sure that it is, you know, the one that's right over here, because that color is different from this color, for instance. All right, hit OK, which selects out the blue. Shift click on the layer mask, Command H to hide your selection, and then here on our layer mask we just want to paint black. There we go. So we have the hair, but the blue background is no more. All right, let's try it again. We're going to go select, down to color range, and here we have our, let's just make sure we deselect here. Select color range, and there we go. And hit OK, which is going to select outside of there. Now we're going to click Command H to hide our selection and paint black right over here as well. And that's going to allow us a nice feathered edge. All right, and then we're going to do the same thing right up over here. So shift click on that. So it's kind of the same thing over and over again. Once you get the hang of it, it's just basically doing the same thing over and over again, which is really nice. There we go. So selected that area out. Now we're going to shift click on this, click on our layer mask, Command H, and then grab our brush tool and paint black. All right, if you want to paint some back, what you want to do is select, go to inverse your selection. So now you're selecting him out rather than the background. Hit Command H again, and then you want to paint, instead of black, you want to paint white, and that'll help you paint some of that area back, which is kind of nice too. All right, there we go. I painted that a little bit too. All right, very nice. So we have all that nice detail back. He's cut out from his background pretty well. If I don't want these stray hairs, I can just mask those out. That's not a real big deal. There we go. Okay, looking good. Now we have the question, our watch. Do we want to bring this up just a little bit so we don't have to, is it worth bringing our watch up just this much so I don't have to like clone stamp all that in? In this case, I think it probably is. It doesn't really ruin it or anything like that to bring that watch up a little bit. So I think that's I think in this case that was the right choice to do. Let's just bring that watch up a little bit. All right, looking great. I'm gonna grab my crop tool and just crop in just a little bit from the bottom here. And you can see he's actually wearing the watch that's in the that's over here in the ad. Pretty cool. And we're going to crop in from the top a little bit and hit this checkbox up there. All right. So getting him cut out from his background, not incredibly complex, but with all the hair and things like that, we did want to make sure that that was done right. All right. The next thing I'm going to do is we're going to actually duplicate this guy. So I'm going to hit Command J to duplicate this layer. Then I'm going to right click here and I'm going to hit Apply Layer Mask. So we have just this guy now on a layer. He looks like that. He's got his head cut off because we applied the layer mask. Now I'm going to click on our lock transparency, and what this is going to do is not allow me to paint on any transparent pixels. So it's only going to allow me to paint on him. So I'm going to lock that transparency, and I'm going to hit Shift Backspace and fill this with black. There we go. So we have a black version of him now. Okay. And then we're going to bring him below the other guy and kind of use this as like a little bit of a shadow here. There we go. We're going to change our layer from normal down to multiply. Unlock our transparency, and then I'm going to give this a Gaussian blur. All right, this will kind of mess with your colors a little bit. Maybe we need a little bit more of a blur on there. I don't necessarily need to see so much information about his ear in the shadow. There we go. If it does like kind of desaturate, try something instead like color burn, which should help out with color. Instead of that being black, let's try locking that transparency again. Let's just try to fill this with like a deep dark blue. All right, and hit Command U on there, and we can just kind of change our saturation, change our lightness down a little bit there. All right, let's try it back on multiply. Cool. So we have a nice shadow there. If it does change your saturation, which in this case it did, we can go ahead and at any point in time fix that, which we're going to be doing in just a little bit. I'm going to give this a little bit more of a blur. There we go. And I'm going to hit Command J and then bring like a version that's slightly closer to his face. Generally, when you guys are creating highlights or shadows or anything like that, you'll want a couple different, like this is just the shadow that's like right behind him, and this is like the feathered out version of the shadow. It really does help to have like a couple different shadow groups. It just helps to add depth. Like this is just doesn't have that much depth, and then here we have a bit more depth there in the shadow, which looks really good. All right, cool. We're looking good. So we're gonna start retouching our hipster here. We got a couple of things I want to do. We still got to take care of some hair and you know, some selections and things like that. But just trying to get like an overall feel of how everything is looking. And yeah, I think we're doing really good. So as long as everything is like placed, you know, pretty well, I think we're looking good. I'm gonna go ahead and fix the shadow. It's a bit too desaturated. It looks a little bit like fake. So what we're gonna do is grab our adjustment layers. I'm gonna go to Hue/Saturation. I'm gonna click on this Colorize button. And now my goal is to kind of match our, you know, blue color from the background here with this Colorize. Now I'm gonna hit Command I on that and invert the layer mask. So I really only want to paint it here where my shadow is. And you can see it just gets a little bit easier to actually see what you're doing. Change our saturation. There we go. And that matches just a bit better. Maybe bring this a little bit over to the left. Okay, cool. So the reason is because if you have something white, like you know, like what we're covering up here, something that light, and you cover it with just black, it's usually not going to be correct because things as they get darker, they don't just like become a darker version of white. They don't just become like gray. That doesn't really make any sense. They usually have some color in them. So by adding that colorized layer over top of it, it just kind of like works in the fact that they actually do have some color in them. Then I'm just going to mask out some of these bubbles because those should continue to be white. Or variation of. All right, cool. That's looking good. Let's just lower the opacity that just a little bit. All right, so we have a nice shadow layer. Let's just shift click the three of those layers and double click on here. Call it shadow. There we go. It just kind of helps him stand out from his background a little bit more. We're going to go ahead and start doing a little bit of adjustments to our main character. We're going to grab our adjustment layers. I'm going to go to curves. Now we're going to clip this, Option Command G, to make this visible only where he's visible. I'm going to click on right here in the middle and pull this down just a bit to kind of like bring out the darker side. Now, we don't really need this layer to be visible everywhere, so we're going to use our brush tool, and I'm going to paint this invisible, especially like, you know, here on his face, maybe here on the left side of his coat, especially up there. We're basically using this as a way to like draw attention away from the right side of the frame, which is going to help us, you know, stay in here towards the left. All right, and it's also going to help to match the dark areas of the background. Let's just bring this watch a little bit brighter as well, because it is kind of an important part of this image. There we go. So just like a quick curves adjustment layer is just kind of making that area a bit darker, which is going to help draw more attention that way, which is exactly what we want. All right, looking really good. We might put a little bit of like feathering on his beard there with our selection in just a little bit. I'm thinking through how we're going to do that. In the meantime, what I'd like to do is we're going to go ahead and start retouching. So we're going to create a new layer, and I can just clip all these layers directly to him. So we're going to use our healing brush tool and just start getting rid of some of these areas, just like we were doing with the watch. Now, just in general, you know, when it comes to retouching males versus females, I tend to retouch them just a little bit less. You know, I think that males can take like a little bit of skin imperfections and things like that. Not that females can't, but it's just like a little bit less work done to the guys. It looks really weird when men have like, you know, like perfect, flawlessly retouched skin. Just like, you know, I've seen it before and I'm always like, what? Why would you do that? So I don't do that, but if you don't agree with me, then you can retouch your men even more. There we go. So just a couple of these little guys we're going to get rid of. But, you know, he's like a big, like a hairy, got a big beard hipster guy. So I'm not going to go crazy with the, like, obviously he's not supposed to be super clean shaven or anything like that anyway. All right. And he's got a little scar here on his forehead here. It's from falling off his bike, which I feel bad for him. Someone like opened their car door into when he was riding his bike, which is horrible. But I kind of like the scar. You know, if this were a beauty image, I would retouch it. But I think the scar gives the image character, so we're going to leave that. Yeah, this retouching here, like how this hair is cut out here, I'm still not 100% happy with that. So let's take another look at it real quick. Shift click on this layer, and we're just going to make this visible and then not visible. All right, what we're going to do is I'm going to use a brush tool. Let's create a new layer right above here. We're going to focus on creating an actual brush that should look a lot like hair. So we'll make this nice and hard, probably about 70% hardness, relatively small as well. And we're going to paint at a flow of about 90%. All right, and basically what I'm doing is right here, I'm just kind of like testing, making our brush a little bit smaller, and testing out what's going to be about like hair. Yeah, that looks about like the size of hair, right? Cool. So now our brush is the size 3. So what I'm going to do is here on my layer mask, I'm going to just paint with this brush. You can paint white or black or whatever you want. But in this case, I'm going to right click and save this brush real quick. We're going to get a new brush preset, and I'm going to call this hair. There we go. Because I'm going to just grab a different brush real quick and just kind of paint this black right over here. And I'm on my layer mask here, so I'm not actually like painting on a new layer or anything like that. I'm painting this black, and then I'm going to come back and paint it white just where his hair is. It did a pretty good job. You know, if this was not like an image where someone's going to be zooming in this far, it did more than good enough. This is not something you would notice when zooming it, you know, at like a relatively well zoomed out. But being that this is like a product shot and people are going to be zoomed in this far, we just want to make sure it looks good even when you do zoom in. All right, and again, you could use a pen tool to define the edge of this if you wanted to. In this case, I think brush tool is just totally fine. All right, so let's focus back up here. I'm going to right click and we're going to go all the way down here, and I'm going to paint with white now, and basically just like, you know, paint in my own hair. The nice thing about this is it, you know, you don't have to worry about masking. It's just going to have the detail of wherever you paint with your brush strokes. You can shift click on these layer masks, you know, to kind of give you an idea of like what the hair actually does. And there we go. Something like that, some eyelash hair there. It's got long eyelashes. So this hair is kind of coming down at an angle like that. This sort of thing takes a bit longer, but it'll make your masking look a little bit more clean. And in the end, that's usually worth a little bit more time. It really does not have to be perfect. Like, you don't have to go to college for painting hair masks. It just has to not look bad. Just remember how zoomed in we are here. All right, and I'm just kind of like painting over and over again here, and we're going to do the same thing over here. Notice I'm not even like trying to get like actually like where the hair would be. Like if I'm painting back some of the blue that's in the background, like that's fine. It's not really that big of a deal. It's just darker and it looks like hair. All right. Maybe some, you know, strays or whatever. Cool. And you can spend as much time or as little time on that as you want. I'm pretty close to stopping with that. All right, we're just going to do the same thing with, you know, some of the beard hair here. All right, you could even use like a clone stamp tool if you wanted to, but there we go. I feel like that's pretty good. So we can see at this level of zoom out, like it doesn't look like clone stamped or anything like weird like that. It looks really good. All right, perfect. So let's go ahead and do some dodging and burning on our guy here, and we can keep everything clipped, or we can just start a new group. And I'm going to go ahead and start a new group. So we're going to shift click all those. That's our, you know, here in our hipster group. It's got our hipster and our shadow. And then we're just going to create a new layer and Command G to group that with itself, and call that DB for dodge and burn. All right, now to dodge and burn, I really like using soft light layers, so we're going to choose this regular brush that I've included as well. I really like using soft light layers, so I'm going to choose go from normal here down to soft light, and now what we're going to do is help to like sculpt this out, especially like his beard. So we're going to paint black and white at a really low intensity here. White is going to allow us to draw more attention to an area, and black will take the attention away from a certain area. All right, so I'm like here on his beard, we're going to paint some dark underneath there to kind of like give that some definition, some white right here in the middle, and then some dark right above it as well. And the goal with this is to go relatively subtle. You almost like don't want to see that you're doing it as you're doing it. It should be like a pretty pretty subtle progression from before to after. All right, let's bring this area up a little bit here. Move that area down a little bit. Maybe kind of exaggerate the natural flow of the beard. And I'm trying to kind of follow the highlights and the shadow patterns that are already, you know, within the beard. So not necessarily trying to create, you know, shapes out of thin air. Like just trying to follow, you know, if an area is in highlight, I'm going to help it out by adding a little bit more highlight. All right, so let's look at the before and after with that. So there's the before and the after. Let's just zoom out. And there we go, before and the after. We can see in some of these areas it's way too much. So we're going to grab the eraser tool and just erase it away a little bit. You want something that's, you know, does add to your image, but again, also is, you know, subtle enough to where it looks real. There we go. That's pretty cool. All right, let's do another one, a new layer. And I'm going to change this from normal down here to soft light again. And we're going to paint black, you know, right down here. There we go, below his cheek, just to give him a little bit more definition there. And we can kind of just decide, you know, how we want this image to kind of play out. All right, I'm not going to paint too much dark under his eyes, although it is, you know, kind of like a shadow area. Let's do it on the top of his eyes instead. If you paint too much black under someone's eyes, it can often look like they actually have like a black eye, which generally you don't really want. All right, let's paint a little bit of dark there as well. Maybe darken down his forehead just a bit. It's just a little bit hot. Lighten up his eyes a little bit. Cool. So let's see that before and after. Looking pretty good. Let's lower the opacity on this a little bit. I think I have the tendency to overdo things. I think most people do, especially when they're, you know, dodging and burning and things like that. So lowering your opacity is always a good idea in my opinion. All right, let's just kind of like highlight that area a little bit. All right, then we'll make this area down here just a bit darker, which will draw less attention to it. Darken the shadow up on the reverse side of the watch, which will in turn draw more attention to the watch itself. All right, and we'll darken the area under his beard here a bit as well. Cool. And normally I just turn these layers off and on real quick just to see, you know, kind of what the effect they have and to make sure that we do like the effect that they have. And turning that off and on, I think that works quite well. Let's lower the opacity of that as well. And here on his face, I feel like we could lower the opacity of that too. All right, definitely looking good. So here's our dodge and burn. You can see that it really does add quite a bit to our guy. Awesome. All right, so we've dodge and burn our guy. He's pretty close to good. Let's see, I'm gonna just work a little bit on his eye. There we go. We're gonna zoom in there and just gonna grab a curves adjustment layer and we're gonna bring this up, something like that, and hit Command I on that. There we go. And then I'm gonna paint in just a little bit of white. There we go. Right, you know, kind of focusing towards the center there. This is on my layer mask, and this is just going to brighten up, you know, the kind of center of those areas there. There we go. This isn't really the image, you know, where we want to go like changing his eye color or anything like that, but just a little bit of brightness, I feel like it's going to help him out. Very cool. All right, let's do some work with our sharpening, and we're going to sharpen the beard and sharpen his eyes and things like that. That's going to help match with the watch, and then we're going to do some cool stuff with the watch with sharpening. All right, so let's just make him invisible and see if we're happy with our shadow. Let's just go ahead and colorize this, give this a little bit more saturation there. All right. Very nice. I think we're looking great. Okay, so let's go ahead and close these two out. There we go. Now we're going to make a new layer and group that with itself, and we're going to call this sharp. All right, and to do this, what we're going to do is make a stamp visible layer. So this is going to be Shift Option Command E. That's going to make your stamp visible layer, which basically is just a duplicate of everything you see. And I'm going to hit Command J a couple times just to duplicate that. So we have a couple different options for sharpening. All right, we're going to hit Shift Command U, which is going to desaturate. Then I'm going to change this from normal down here to something like linear light, which is going to be very harsh on effect. And we're going to go filter, other, and here to high pass. Okay, and this will be, you know, the interesting things like when it comes to his beard. This will be, you know, a pretty interesting effect there. Yeah, linear light might be too much. Let's try changing this back to overlay, which is going to be a little bit less of an effect there. All right, this looks good. So I'm going to hold Alt or Option and click on my layer mask, and then I'm going to paint white on that layer mask. So Alt or Option, clicking on your layer mask makes it black layer mask, which makes everything invisible. Now I'm just painting white on it to make sure that it is visible, in fact. And I'm doing this just on the areas that I want to draw attention to. Let's shift click on this layer and see what it's doing with our watch. It really, you know, makes our watch stand out quite a bit more. All right, so that's really nice. Both of those layers. Cool. We're going to do the same thing. Shift Command U to desaturate that. We're going to hit overlay on this one. And now we're going to try a different radius with our high pass. And it's just going to give us a slightly different effect. So if we wanted like more smaller detail, we can do that. Or we can bring this up and get even more like heavy detail. All right. And this will be interesting, but we generally want to use this a little bit more sparingly. So we're going to put a black layer mask on that as well. Let's paint some white here on that watch. Looked pretty good. A little bit here on the beard. All right, and I'll shift click there. Maybe here in like the bubbles and things like that. It looked kind of good and around the face. All right, so we want to be pretty, we don't want to go overboard with this guy. All right, and now we have another one, and you can just do the same thing again. Shift Command U, we can do overlay. Let's just zoom into the eyes, and we'll do filter, other, and high pass. And now we'll try just lowering our radius. There we go, something like that. And this should be good for like, you know, just sharpening up either everything or again, like just the eyes and things like that. So we have like, this is like kind of like a medium sharpen where it goes at a medium level. This is a high level and this is a low level. So each of the three kind of combine to get that before and after, which is really nice. Let's look at our watch now. There's the before and the after. Just looks a bit sharper and a bit more interesting. Notice we kept these away from our background for the most part because I don't really care about that. It's background. We don't necessarily want that to be sharp. All right, that shadow's still not perfect to be honest. I'm not loving it. One thing we can do is kind of move our background because remember, it's like, you know, it's just back there. We can move the background to where it's a little bit less distracting. There we go. And now let's try the shadow over top of there. Let's try soft light instead of multiply. Soft light is going to combine the colors as well. Yeah, this is working a little bit better here. All right. And then we don't even need this layer because soft light combines color with luminosity. All right. So sometimes that's going to happen. Is like you'll get to where you think something looks good and then kind of continue editing and just be like, yeah, you know what? That's really not that nice. I'm going to lighten up right around that area. Let's just grab a curves adjustment layer, lighten that up just a bit, which is just going to make it look like it matches this exposure just a bit more. There we go. That looks pretty good. The dodge and the burn, just making sure that I still like that. I think it's a little bit harsh here in the face, so I'm going to bring the opacity down on that just a little bit more. And on the beard, I think it's come down a little bit more as well. There we go. So oftentimes that's going to happen, guys. You're just going to get something and it's going to look like pretty good one way, and then you'll look at it an extra few minutes and be like, ooh, never mind. It doesn't really look that good. I need to change. All right. Very nice. And the background, I'd like to add a little bit of a blur to where we're kind of matching this blur here. So here on our background, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this into a smart object. So I'm going to right click on here and we're going to go to convert to smart object. Now I'm going to add a Gaussian blur, but I'll be able to change this Gaussian blur because it's a smart object. So as a smart object, now we're going to go with filter, blur, and over here to Gaussian blur. All right, and I can kind of choose my blur that I want. Let's just choose something like that. Looks pretty good. And you can see, because it's a smart object, it loads as a smart filter, not just a regular filter. So I can actually just turn this off and on if I want to do that, which you can't do with a normal, you know, if you just normally add a Gaussian blur, which I think is really, really helpful. If you guys are doing blurs, especially with something like this, you can also double click here and, double click right here on the Gaussian blur, and you can change it later too. So you can say more blur or less of a blur. All right, I think that works quite well though, having just a little bit of a blur. All right, very cool. Now the last couple things we're gonna do, just to kind of like tie everything together, we're going to add a new group and we're gonna do some work with color. Because this is like a hipster image, I think it actually could benefit from using like a levels adjustment layer. We're gonna pull up our blues in the shadows and our yellows here in the highlights. Not crazy. You can't go too crazy with this sort of thing because it is a product shot, but I think we can get away with something. So that's, you know, just a little bit of color toning there. I think it's gonna look good. Maybe in our reds, if we push it just a little bit towards red. Yeah, that might be too much. There we go. Let's try desaturating this image just a little bit. It's going to give us a little bit more of a cool look here on our hipster. All right. That looks good. Under that layer, I'm going to add some like color from the background over top of him. And the reason I want to do it under this layer is if I change my mind, I'll be taking the background color, not the color that changed through this. So we're going to create a new layer, group that, and just call this background carryover, which doesn't make a lot of sense, but we're going to grab our brush tool, and now I'm going to grab some of this color here and just kind of paint it on over top of our subject. Just a little bit. I'm overdoing it in this case, but you'll get the point in just a second. And what this does is it just kind of like integrates your subject with their background just a little bit better. All right. Now it is darkening some of these areas here, like darkening that, right? So we want to change this from normal down here to lighten. So it's only going to lighten areas, especially around my suit. And then we're just going to lower the opacity. So I'm going to hit V and then number 2 for 20. Let's try 30. So it's not a whole lot. It's just like a little bit of like flare that kind of comes from the background over top of your subject. And anytime you're doing compositing, like that little bit of stuff can really help to integrate things back together again. So I would recommend doing that. Just looks a little bit better. But if I decide I don't like it, I haven't taken the color over top of this, so I can still change these colors and they won't affect what's going on here. So that's why I did it underneath that color, if that makes sense. All right, looking very cool. There's another couple things I'd like to do with our hipster here. I'm going to try, let's go here in our color. We're going to try to go to a selective color. I'm going to choose our reds, and we're just going to pull down our blacks a little bit, which is going to kind of desaturate him out a little bit. We're going to pull up a little bit of yellow and maybe some magenta. Just kind of give him like a cool color to his skin. There we go. Next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to go over here to our channels. I'm going to click on our red channel, green channel, and blue channel. And I'm going to use our green channel to draw some of the highlights out of his face and maybe even into the watch as well. So we're going to duplicate our green channel. And I'm going to hit Command L to bring up our levels. And basically just go left to the right all the way until we're just starting to see some highlights here. There we go. That should look really nice. So when you're using your levels, basically anything that is dark is not going to get selected. Anything that's light will get selected. So in this case, you can see that little area of his skin will be selected, these bubbles, the watch hand, and things like that. All that's going to get selected out. So to turn this into a selection, just hold down the Control or Command key and click on your layer mask. Sorry, just click on your channel. Now we're going to go to our layers, and I'm going to create a new layer, and I'm going to hit Shift, Delete, and I'm going to fill this with white and hit OK. And that's just going to add like a little bit of that sheen to his skin. And I can use a layer mask to have this only be visible on him. You can see it's visible here on our watch as well. Just kind of adds a little bit of that, like, more information. If we like it just on him, we can have it be visible just on him. Or if we like it on everything, we can do that as well. I think it kind of works on everything. Kind of like ties the image together a little bit more, in my opinion, which is very cool. Let's do a little bit of curves adjustment layers. Just kind of like, there we go. Bring that down. And I'm going to do something kind of weird. I'm going to grab my lasso tool here. And we're just going to start painting around like this. I'm going to use this as a layer mask. But the reason I'm doing this instead of just choosing like a rectangular or elliptical marquee or whatever is because I want this pattern to look a little bit more random. It'll look more real that way. So there we go. That's selected. Let's hold down the Shift key and make sure we're selected inside there. Cool. Now I'm going to hit Command I. And we can see like it's a pretty random pattern, right? When I give this a blur, it's going to look a lot more natural than it would if you just grab like a marquee tool. So we're going to go to Filter, down here to Blur, and to Gaussian Blur. Actually, it kind of looks cool, like over top of the watch like that, in my humble opinion. All right, so we can see that definitely does look cool, especially, you know, here in the watch. Here in this area, he's a little bit too dark in some areas, so we're just going to paint this black on our layer mask here, about 20% visibility. All right, does look very cool. Now keep in mind this is above our selective color layer that we added. If I wanted to, sorry, it's above our levels. If I want to bring this down, it's going to have a different effect with this color still being in the blue range. So above and below. I think it works better below. So our color is still in that blue range that we want, that we love, that we keep so dear to our hearts. Beautiful. Let's make sure his watch is a little bit lighter. Okay, now we're going to do the same thing with being light. So I'm going to grab a curves adjustment. We're going to make things a little bit lighter in this case. And we're just going to grab, you know, some things like that. It's like select that around here, right around the watch, maybe here, up his forehead. Grab that. Sure, that looks pretty good. Why not? hit Command I on that and deselect by hitting Command D. Now we're going to hit Filter, Blur, and then Gaussian Blur. And it's just going to draw a little more attention to that. But see, it doesn't really look like we did that in Photoshop because it's just like it's a random weird pattern, you know? So it looks less Photoshoppy in my opinion. In my humble opinion, it looks less Photoshoppy. All right, our hipster, let's just see the dodging and burning on his skin. Yeah, it looks pretty good. I think this darker area, let's just have this be either a uniform dark or light there on his jacket. It's just a little bit too blotchy. All right, so we can see the difference that color layer made at the end, and that won't affect your sharpness or anything like that. So, here we're zoomed in at, geez, 25%. Oh God, this image is huge. This is full size. Wow, I guess that's what you get for working with a 60 megapixel file. Golly. Okay, well, this is full size. That's half size. This is 1/4%. We've been working at like 12.5% visibility. That's just insane. Okay, well, that's fun. So we can see what a difference this makes. Let's just turn this layer off and then back on again to see, like, it just makes everything a little bit more interesting color-wise. It draws a little bit more attention to the watch and a little bit less attention to the background. Just kind of like brings everything together. And yeah, there we go, guys. That's the end of the tutorial. I think it looks great. I mean, the watch really couldn't look better. It's gorgeous. It's well done. It's cool. It's stylized, and the image as a whole really is, I think, put together really, really well. So let's go ahead and break it all the way down. Again, we started off with our watch. We have our watch 1. Let's just break it down real quick again. We started off here, added some more detail. Each of these is adding a bit of detail. Watch the face, and we changed the color on that as well. There we go. A little bit more adding the background, retouching. We did some really cool stuff with using the brush tool and the noise, if you remember. Okay, background, we just added that and pushed that to the right a little bit more. Now our hipster, which we started off with, we created a shadow, which we redid like 3 times. I'm glad we did because it looks better in the end. Our hipster himself, who we did some retouching and some dodging and burning to as well. Added a little bit more dodging and burning and then lightened his eyes up a little bit. Then we did some sharpening of the image itself in 3 different layers to get our mid-level, low-level, and high-level. Then we added a little bit more of the background carryover, and then we did even more dodging and burning and some color work there at the end. So there we have it, guys. Very, very cool image, and I really hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial and learned a ton. Thanks a bunch, and I'll Phlearn you later. Bye, everyone.